We are going to do a stash tour today. I'm filming this on the 6th of February, which by my reckoning means that we have just about started 2025. I thought it might be a really nice thing to do to start that year of knitting off by looking at everything that I have, so my entire stash, and then talking through some of the ideas for projects that I have and talking through some of the difficulties of using some of that yarn. I'm going to now bring across all of my yarn, so bear with whilst I assemble all of it here on the floor. Ta-da! Okay, this is it. I have 1, 2, 3 ottomans all filled with yarn. I've got this miscellaneous basket here. I've got this tray of stuff that's mostly actually works in progress. Maybe that doesn't count. Oh, and I have another bag. And actually I have another tray of stuff here. So here I am in my stash. The way that I organize my stash is by weight of yarn. So I think a lot of people do this differently. I find obviously that when you go for a project, it tends to be that you think about whether it's going to meet gauge first or not, and then you might think about what colours work best. And I also think when you're doing colour work, I quite like to be able to have all the things that are similar weights all organised together. You might see my cat wandering in and about. This is presumably to her a kind of Disneyland of yarn that she can play with. So I think what I've got is a couple of trays of stuff that I'm working on. Here and here. Here and here. These are probably, they don't count. Hang on, we need to consult the dictionary for this. Stash yarn is the term that knitters use to refer to their yarn, specifically yarn that is currently being stored, but which is presumably for future use. I'm reading from my laptop. And I don't wear these glasses. I'll just be real with you. That probably excludes these trays, because these are for current projects. If you're interested in what I'm currently working on and what I'm planning on working on, I did do a first episode of my podcast and launched it a week or so ago. And I intend to do updates on there every so often. So please do follow along there if you're really interested in what I'm working on. This is more about what I'm not thinking about, what I'm not working on. I'm going to start with lace and fingering weight yarn, which I believe is in this box. If you've watched any of my other videos, you'll know already, but I had a problem with moths last year. So everything that I own is, pretty much everything that I own is wrapped up in these Lakeland plastic bags. And they all have on them a label to say what's in there. This is my fingering weight animal yarn. Just to show you that I'm not actually that organised. There is a bunch of stuff that is just kind of disorganised. Voila. This is a bag of fingering weight non-animal yarn. This is lace weight yarn I have. This is more fingering animal weight, but slightly less special stuff. So this is like, I've got some drops in here, colours I'm slightly less fond of, or a bit more basic styles of yarn. The first bag that I showed is more fingering wool that is hand dyed or, you know, like a special scheme. And I also have in here this bag, which is a kind of kit that I was given as a Christmas present by my This is a Christmas present that I was given by my partner's mother, and it is a set of skeins a set of balls, tweed balls, that will make a pair of socks. She's given me a couple of kits like this, and I've made some really good stuff from it. So it all comes with a pattern, and the patterns are quite interesting. So they have cool colour work to them. They're quite exciting in that way. So that's quite an easy one in terms of stash, because I know exactly what I'm going to make with that. There's 2 colours in this one, and there are 6 balls of, this will be 25 grams each. So that's what, 150 grams of sock weight yarn that already has a plan. So that can go back in. This is, so I've got 3 roughly 100-gram skeins. I got this in Japan, and I bought it specifically to make a certain project. So the plan for this is to make the Khalad shirt. That's by Jessica Tsung, and it's a crochet sort of shirt. The one that the picture represents has pretty much the exact same colours as this. It's a slightly different yarn, but I have wanted that shirt for a really long time, so I know exactly what I'm going to make with these. That I'm going to wait and knit up, I think, in the summer, and I think it's going to look really, really cool. I do tend to knit more than crochet, but I think there's some things that just look a bit better when they've been crocheted, and I think this might be an example of that. This can go back in the box now, because this also has a plan. I really hope that this initial burst is giving you the sense that I have a really structured idea of what I'm going to do with all of my stash. Hold on to that as we get into the next bits. What I'm going to do next is cover, let's stick with kind of lace weight. So this is a bag of lace weight yarn. This is a kind of offshoot of that. So obviously that blue is the same one. And the difference between these 2 bags is this one has in it this bundle, which I'm going to see if I can show this properly on camera. This is something I unwound. So I held together 2 bits of lace weight, I think it was mohair, silk mohair, something like that, with this, which is, I know this actually because it's one of my favourite yarns, it's Summer Light 4-ply from Rowan. So I held this as 3 strands together and it made this yarn, which was quite a nice sort of shimmery, it looked really good. I took some of it back because it was a self-made sort of like scrappy project, and then I decided I didn't quite want that yarn at that point in the project, so I undid it, but I didn't fully unravel the 2 bits of yarn, and I kind of get the sense that I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do it until I figure out what I might want to use that yarn for, because it was really annoying to have to unwind it. So I think the lesson is, if you're using multiple bits of yarn together, be sure that's what you really want to do, because you definitely don't want to undo it later on down the line. I can go back in the box. It has a sort of purpose, if not a plan. This bag, I have helpfully left some tags in here that relate to something, I'm sure. I have this ball, which maybe I didn't keep the tag for, but I bought this. It's like a shimmery, I think it's like Essentials, Rico Essentials maybe. It is sparkly and shimmery, and I held it with another bit of yarn, buccal yarn. Is that how you say buccal yarn? Maybe. I held it with that to make my Boulevard bag, which is a bag by Lily Kate Francis. Lily Kate Makes on Instagram, I think. And actually, as luck would have it, it's right there, hanging on the back of my door. So this is a remainder bit from that. I haven't quite figured out what I'm going to do with it. I think having these sort of random bits of mohair is a particularly tricky thing to make something with. I don't really have a justification for that, but I've definitely found it hard to use these bits of mohair because I rarely make a mohair only project. It will always be kind of held with something. So, you know, I think I have seen people do some quite cool things where they have one fingering weight color throughout a project, and then they alternate skeins of mohair as stripes. So it can create kind of a subtle stripe with that really nice underlying color palette from whatever the fingering weight base is. So maybe I'll have a think about doing something like that. I think the tricky bit about this is that it's a bit sparkly, so would it go with something that's not sparkly? Like, would it overpower something, or would it not really shine? Would it not show the best bit of itself? That's the sort of thing that I think about with yarn. How can you bring out the best in the yarn that you have? I also have a couple of balls of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair. I bought too much of this for a project like what I was just talking about, where I held this with exactly the same colour of Knitting for Olive merino. So this colour is Dusty Olive, and I used it to make my cargill, which is a design by the Crayabea. It's right over there, but I'll save that for another time. So if you want to hear a bit more about that, tune in for an actual podcast where I will probably wear it and talk a bit about how I made that. If I talk about it now, this will be a 3-hour long podcast. The last thing that's in this bag, this is a bit of a sad story, actually. I think this is truly beautiful. It doesn't look amazingly beautiful right now because it's been all folded, but I signed up for a test knit a few years ago, and the design, if I remember the name of the designer and the actual name of the design, and I'll put it up on screen, I was a DNF for this test knit, unfortunately, and I feel really regretful about it, but I'll kind of explain why. So I made this out of a type of yarn that I just love. So it's Jepard Kid Seta. This is one of the tags. The color for this is, it's 1122 ultramarine, and it was really hard to get. I think I got a couple of balls of it from a local yarn shop, and then I was searching directly on their website. I was desperately trying to find more of it, but it was kind of discontinued or out of stock for ages. I eventually got 10 balls of it from a shop called McCulloch and Wallace in London, who were really helpful and really great. And even though they were out of stock as well, they managed to find it for me. So they did me a solid. And I knit this up, but you can probably see on camera that even though I was holding 2 balls of it, even though I used the same lot number and obviously the same color, there's like a gradient shift about halfway down. So if I hold it with one hand for a sec, you can see that. Oh, I've lost it. Maybe it never was there in the first place. No, it definitely is there. You can even see it on camera. But there's a kind of gradient shift, like halfway down the jumper, about here, where it's gone from a darker color to a lighter one on the bottom. And I was out and I was knitting this, and then my friend, who I think her eyesight just must be really good, or she has tetrachromacy or something like that, but she looked at it and said, "Oh, is it supposed to be 2 different blues? Is it supposed to be like 2 different things?" And that was the first that I'd noticed it. And I looked at it and I was like, no. No, it's not. It's not supposed to be that. So so I lost faith in it, and I've been too sad to really go back and pick it back up. The one thought that I did have, and that relates to the last thing in this bag, is that I bought this, which is from Crochet Soul Wool. I bought a couple of things just as a side note from Crochet and made a couple of things from their wool, and I really recommend it. I think it's the only brand that I have routinely seen that has recycled yarn. So I made a cardigan out of recycled PET bottles, plastic bottles from yarn from them. So if you are eco-conscious and thinking about buying yarn, I really recommend them. So the plan with this was, across that color gradient, the idea was that I would do like a kintsugi style crack with this gold yarn, as in embroider across it as though it's 2 fractured bits of porcelain that have been melded together with that Japanese mending technique that is popular because it's so beautiful, where you use gold, or I think more commonly gold style metal, to fuse the 2 pieces of your fractured porcelain or your fractured ceramic back together. And I thought, if I kind of had that in my head as a vision, and the reason I've not done it is because embroidery is a lot harder than you think, and I really wanted it to be a good job. So I had it in my head that I needed to learn how to embroider properly before I did it. The other thing that I need to do is actually do something with these arms. So in the original test knit, it's a kind of capped, I'm going to say Snow White sleeve. There's probably an actual term for this, but it's that sort of sleeve. I definitely don't have enough of this blue yarn left to be able to do that. And given the difficulty that I had finding it the first time, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do that again. So I think the question for me is whether, because it's quite a deep armhole, I might have it as quite a loose sort of vest, or I might do something to sort of sew up the armholes a bit. I think it's these kind of little things that I need to think through that have stopped me from doing it. And then my other kind of thought was to tie this together was to have some other artificial fractures across the jumper. As I'm saying this, I think it sounds really good. I think that sounds super cool. Maybe I should I'm getting a bit of enthusiasm about it. Maybe I should put this on my queue as a plan. But that's the idea with that, and so it's just been kind of sitting here a little bit unloved since then. Relevant to my point about it's so difficult to unravel yarn that has been put together. This is 2 bits of the mohair knitted together, so I don't want to have to do that unraveling. It also has, I think, an Italian bind off, which every time I've had to undo an Italian bind off, it has been like 6 hours of work, and I don't know why that is. But doing that with mohair, 2 strands put together, I am not, like, this unfortunately is this yarn's final state. I will not be unraveling this. I just need to turn it into something that I love. And if I can turn it into something that I love that also is maybe sort of variable, like if I can do the embroidery in such a way that it wouldn't ruin the fabric underneath and I could kind of mix and match it, maybe that would be the thing to do. Stay tuned on that one. So maybe I'll talk about this stuff first. I think this is probably a little bit more straightforward than the next bag that I've got. As I said, this is fingering weight animal fibre that I'm slightly less excited about. So it has some stuff that I've had for ages. Like this, I think I taught myself how to knit with yarn like this. I have no idea what it is. Something like this, which is it's quite rough to hold. It's a rustic yarn for sure. And then this, which has a bit of a halo to it. I don't really know what it is. It's thicker than like a lace mohair, but it could be, maybe it could be a thicker mohair. I just don't really often see mohair like this at all. It's got quite high ply, whatever that means. Like it's got quite a few strands knitted together. And then some of the other stuff that I've got in here, kind of uninspiring colours. So I have a few balls of this, which is, it's Drops Baby Merino, extra fine merino wool. I don't know what the colour is, but obviously you can see it's kind of like a deep grey. So I think I have 4 balls of that, 5 balls maybe of that in here. And then a couple of other similar style things, I think things that I've used for baby knits, like making little booties, making little hats, things like that. So they're probably offshoots of various like baby knit projects that I've done before. The reason I have so much of this, as I say, quite uninspiring grey colour is because about sorry, I have to wait for her to kind of step away from the mic because otherwise it's going to have a lot of okay. So the reason I have quite a lot of that grey yarn. Oh, pets. Are you going to settle? The reason I have quite a lot of that grey yarn is because I like to run when I'm not knitting. And 2 years ago, so in 2023, I did my first ever marathon. And I had this, like, it was really hard. So I'm not, especially at that time, I'm not really like a natural runner. So I thought to motivate myself, I thought that to motivate myself, I would maybe knit like a temperature scarf, but for my running training. So if you don't know what a temperature scarf is, it is, well, a temperature blanket is what people typically make. And it will have a range of different colors. Normally, the typical examples will be from like a blue through to a red, and people will make these, you know, for time periods. So they might do it for a year. I've seen some people do, and I really would like to do this at some point, to do it for a pregnancy as a baby blanket. I think that's so cute. It's such a nice memento for that child to see the temperatures of the days as they were incubating. So I thought I would do something similar for my marathon training. And the idea was that based on distance that I'd run that day, I would knit a couple of rows of this scarf. And then my non-running days would be all in this grey as the base. I obviously didn't end up making the scarf. I had this plan that it would be like double knit, but I didn't really know how to do double knit at that point. So I was kind of just guessing, and it ended up looking a bit sad. And it ended up being a little bit more of a burden whilst I was also doing all of this running at the same time. So I never made that project. And then since then, I haven't used that yarn because I don't think these like cold greys really suit me, but they're also not very pleasant to give to a baby. Like if you're going to give a present to a kid, I would think you would want to give something that's like jolly and light and sort of springtime rather than, you know, cold, hard, grey. So I don't really know what I'm going to do with that. I feel like maybe with some of the stuff I should sell it or get rid of it. It's a good amount of yarn that you could use to make something. I actually do have a really good pattern for a kind of cardigan, like a toddler cardigan. So maybe that would be the thing to do, is to make a sort of sophisticated toddler cardigan for all of those fine, sophisticated toddlers about town that need something to wear to their Sunday engagements, that sort of thing. So that's that. That's that bag. She can go back in. Now we get on to, I was going to say now we get on to the good stuff, but before we get on to the really good stuff, I have another bag which is full of, this is fingering weight non-animal. And it's in this bag that I got some dungarees, I think. There's a range of different stuff in here. There is, I mentioned earlier, a cardigan that I made out of wool from recycled plastic bottles. This is the offshoot of that. I think this is a really nice colour. That's all that I have of that. Again, I think this might be a really good thing for a baby knit, or it would be a really good colour to match with some others and do an interesting fingering weight colour project. The rest of the stuff that's in here, God knows. This is why you should have clear plastic bags for all of your stuff. So it's a combination of natural organic cotton balls for things like crochet projects, crochet toys, things that I've bought as part of colour kits where I use the other colours but haven't used these ones yet. Loads of Sostran Gren cotton, green cotton, which I bought, and then I kind of instantly regretted this because I was like, all of these balls had slightly different colours to them, so it was a bit pointless to have 10 because it would have that problem of you would see when the colour was changing. And also it wasn't organic cotton, and I heard somewhere that basically like non-organic cotton is really, really environmentally intensive to make. So I also had that sort of regret of like, I've bought this quite environmentally intensive thing without really knowing what I'm going to make with it. I mean, everything has an impact, doesn't it? So there's also some balls of this, which is, as I mentioned before, one of my favourite yarns to work with. It is Rowan Summerlight 4-ply. I think they also have Summerlight DK, but I've not actually used that. But I'd like to use that in the future. I have a couple of balls of that kind of red colour. How many balls do I have? 1, 2, I think that's it. And they're obviously quite small balls, so they're 50 grams each. So I have about 100 grams of this colour. So I think that, I mean, this would be quite difficult to make something out of, I think. That can go back in there. I mean, this is heavy. There's a lot of yarn in here. This is heavy. So we're going to go on to the last bag of stuff from the fingering weight box. And then I'm going to talk about this, and it will be clear, I think, why I'm going to talk about that next. This is fingering weight animal. And I also have this, which was lying loose, which is exactly the same as this bigger ball in here. This is Novita. Focus? Yeah. Novita 4-ply from the Natural collection. I don't know what colourway this is, but it's, I think, a really nice gorgeous green colour. And I used this to make a pair of gloves for my partner, which I talked about in episode 1 of my knitting podcast, that it needed a bit of a repair. So I talk about that at the end as a repair project, as well as something that I made. So if you are interested in hearing more about that, please go and check that out. I have a couple of other things in here. Here is another beautiful green, and this is the remainder of the Knitting for Olive dusty olive merino that I held with the mohair from the lace bag. So I've got about 100 grams of that. I have got a lot of sort of 100 to 200 grams bundles of things in here. So this is it's from Zakami yarn, and it is an exclusive skein that was hand dyed for a festival in Edinburgh called the Woolly Good Festival. And if you supported the festival, if you were like a patron of the festival, then you got given one of the 2 of these. I used one already to make the top that I'm wearing, which is the Nicola top by Bert and Rose. This I really enjoyed making. I massively enjoyed making. I wear this top all the time. This yarn I did struggle with choosing a project for, so it's obviously quite close to like my skin tone, and that meant that I felt like with the 2 skeins I couldn't make just a top without any other colour to it. I think I would have felt like from far away it would have looked like I wasn't wearing anything. But I really like this interspersed with this pink, which I think is like a baby merino that I picked up in a shop in Brighton. The remaining skein, I think, is going to have to become, it'll have to become socks. I don't know if 100 grams is enough to make a pair of socks. They might have to be quite short ones, or that I might have to do some sort of like design on them as well. But this is, it does say that it is deliberately sock yarn. So I'm not a massive sock knitter, and that's why I haven't yet made this up. I haven't yet kind of found the energy and excitement to make a pair of socks. But when that strikes, and it certainly will at some point over the course of this year, I know I've got this. I also have, on the theme of socks, this is lace weight organic Shetland wool, and it is, I've got 2 skeins of this, but they're 50 grams, so that's 100 grams in total. I bought this with the idea of making a pair of socks out of them. I think on reflection that wouldn't work very well at all. If somebody's watching this and is like a prime sock knitter, please let me know. But my understanding is that anything without a bit of nylon in it is going to be a bit tough. It's not going to be very hard wearing as a pair of socks. So that makes this a bit of an unknown. I'm not really 100% sure what I'm going to use this for. It's a nice colour, I think. Like, it's quite a beautiful brown. It's very like, it is very Shetland. It's terrible, like it says Shetland, and then I'm like, wow, yeah, it really is, but it really, really is. So yeah, unclear on that one. This 200 gram set that I've got is also yarn that I got as part of the Woolly Good gathering. So this is you can obviously see it's kind of like bluey with gold tones in it. It is from Iolair yarn, which again, they made this exclusive colorway for that festival. It's called Sea Glass. It is non-superwash yarn, and I think it's so gorgeous. I think it's so beautiful. So I've got 200 grams of that. When summer comes around, this will be the time for this yarn. I think it will be a really nice tee of some variety, tee or a vesty sort of thing like what I'm wearing now, something like that. That's the vision for this yarn. I'm going to stay on theme actually before I go to that one. At that festival, having received 400 grams of yarn for being a sponsor or a patron or whatever on their crowdfunder, I also went and bought this super gorgeous steely pure silk 4-ply. It's called, or the colorway is called Nevermore, and it is from Yarn Tings. So I had a really nice chat with the owner of the yarn store at her stall, and she said that she had made herself a little top in one skein of this. She was a bit more slight than I was, so I bought 2 skeins, and I thought I'm going to have, again, a little kind of shimmery, I'm going to have like a little shimmery tee made up in this. And I don't know why, again, I don't know why I haven't made this. One thing that she did say was that because it's so fine, it actually kind of hurt a little bit to work with, in that the threads were gently sawing against her fingers, and that it ended up, she had really dry, like cut fingers almost at the end. I'm 100% paraphrasing, and I, despite her saying that, I still thought it looked really fun and really beautiful and exciting to work with. So that will be something to test and something to feedback on when I come to making this in the future. The next, this is like 100+ grams of something. So I used a bit of one skein for making a rumble raglan, which is a design by Lydia Morrow, which I, again, will talk about at another date. This was the offshoot of one of those, this was the offcut of one of those colours, and then I had a whole other skein of it. My plan for this was to make a helix halter, which is a Jessie Maid design. Jessie Maid, sorry. And I did a swatch for it and everything, and I just haven't gotten around to actually making that. I think it's such a cool design. It's not particularly wearable. It's a bit see-through. So it has this like gorgeous sort of crisscross bit to it. Checking because my cat is causing some chaos. But I think she's all good. It has this gorgeous like crisscross design to it, and it's obviously like a halter bit. You can do a long sleeved one which has a cold shoulder, or you can just do the cold shoulder version. It might, if it doesn't end up being that, it might be another Jessie Maid gorgeous little top thing. So we'll see how that goes. Then the rest of the stuff is, again, offshoots of different projects. So I have this as a remainder of my jackpot jersey, which was a test knit that I did for Lydia Morrow. So I have this from Hans Yarn. I have this gorgeous ball, which is a mushroom themed yarn. It's called Portobello from Dystopic Yarn. I have this sock yarn, which I used the rest of to make Barbara socks last year. This tiny little ball of pink yarn left over from my Rumble Raglan. And then I have, oh, here's another tiny little ball from the top that I'm wearing. More knitting for Olive Merino. And then various different colours of little offshoots. I'm just going to show you them all in the bag. Got some greens. Have this bowl of Bordeaux knitting for Olive. And another little scrap of it. And then I have this, I think, honestly amazing green yarn. I can't remember where I got this from. I think this is sock yarn as well. I have to just kind of knit it up and see what happens. And also this blue, this is Socks Yeah yarn. So, and then this matching La Bien Ami yarn. So this is kind of obviously the steely colour with like some of that gold and amber running through it, and then this is an amber colour. And I think they go really nicely together. This is all I have of this, except I do have some in a project, a finished object, and a finished object that I never wear. So my vision with that is that I will unwind that finished object and bring it back, and then I'll have loads of that yarn that I can then make into something else. And again, I think it's going to be like a nice tee, or maybe like a fingering weight jumper with a cool design around the yoke, so that I can use that silvery stuff and then have the like amber design. That might be a really fun thing to do. So that is all of my fingering weight yarn. I think that what I've learned about storing yarn is keep the tags, like really keep the tags, because you don't know what weight that yarn is until you like try and work with it. And at that point, you know, I don't want to be like making a gauge swatch for absolutely everything that I want to make. It's just like untenable. I mean, who has the time and energy to make a gauge swatch speculatively on the basis of using up like one tiny little scrap of yarn, thinking, what is it? What is it? Like fingering weight? Is it DK? What is it? Who has got the energy? And me. Okay, so we've got through one big bag, one big box. Aligned to this is this bag, this bundle of stuff. This is like absolutely like airing your dirty laundry out on screen. It's a selection of like fun colors for in Cotton DK. Like loads of really fun colors. I think I got a fun kind of kit of stuff. So it's a mixture of that, and then it's a mixture of stuff that is in a ball of mess that I don't want to think about. It's also got, it's like more and more of this. More and more. And more. More and more. And then underneath all of that is a project that I started genuinely 12 years ago. Sorry to have this poor little guy out on screen. I made this from a book that a boyfriend gave me at the time, which was called Knit Your Own Boyfriend. And maybe it was like a premonition. It's like a sort of strange version of the sweater curse, because we did not last. But I had this book to knit your own boyfriend. So this was me knitting a guy from this. I don't think I ever quite got to the stage where I was like, I need to knit myself as somebody to stay so that I'm not so lonely. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the evidence tells a different story. I've just noticed he has like a needle. He had a needle in his torso. So maybe I also used it as like a bit of a voodoo doll. I actually don't think that saying voodoo doll is right anymore. Maybe I was just letting out some frustration on this poor little guy. But I have no idea what to do with him. I have no energy to get the yarn back from it. But there's also just like, in this, I think, sort of dismembered versions of further little guys. So this would have been like the head that you would then attach the hair to, and this is, you get the idea. I also have in here some of this yarn, which I think is like King Cole tinsel yarn, and it's managed to wrap itself around absolutely everything in this bag. So don't worry, I will not be kind of going through this, but you can see how there's this sort of combination of random bits of yarn that, yeah. I think every single knitter has a bag like this, which is something that you maybe have the energy to untangle a little bit of, but you definitely don't have the energy to untangle all of it. And also, the prize is not that great. I have no burning needs to get at some of this yarn, so it has kind of stayed in the state that it's in, with a little guy who kind of takes care of it, and then covered with chunks and chunks of Cotton DK yarn that makes it look as though there's some sort of rhyme or reason to this bag when I stack them all on top of each other. So now you know my shameful secret. Please don't judge me for it, you know? This is a place of trust. I'm letting you in. Ta-da! Right, the next couple of boxes are probably going to be a little bit quicker. Regardless, I think that I'm probably going to split this video into two. So when when the time comes, that will be how I split this up. So I will, at this point, say thank you for watching part 1 of my stash tour. This has been Knits by Bex. You have seen a number of kind of chaotic conspiracies of the mind to trick me into believing that all of this has a plan to it. I've run through all of my lace weight and my fingering weight yarn, and in part 2 I'm going to go through anything a bit bigger. So DK weight yarn, Aran worsted, and chunky yarn. See you then.